everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. So I'm going to be doing the September update, or update number 8 for my Pan Those Eyeshadows. Ideally this would have gone up like a week ago, but last week was not super fantastic for filming. They've been doing all this construction on the building next door, and basically anytime I was home and wanted to film, there was like this sort of constant banging, vibration, saws, so I kind of had to like push it back. So here we are. This is a little late, but I should be back on track for the next one. So I do actually have a decent update. I have one rollout and some pretty good progress on some other things. I also have some bonus pans to show you, and then we're going to be officially rolling out one of my holdover shades from last month. So before I get started, I'm going to just throw a photo on screen of the color story that I was working on last month. A very deep, very grungy, very fall appropriate, all things that I love. So let's just get straight on into it. So I'm going to start off with my least used shade this month, which is from my Milk Cheese and Parties palette, and I did roll in the shade Cheese and Parties a couple months ago. This is a really gorgeous deep burgundy shade, and I really do enjoy working on this, but I haven't really been reaching for it as much. Recently I've reached for this 4 times since the last update for 10 uses overall, and honestly I don't think this looks a whole lot different. I feel like I said this the last update too, but whenever I use this, I usually use it on a pretty small brush along my lower lash line, or like on the outer third of my eyelid for a little bit more dimension. This is such a dark shade that I don't often use it as an all over lid shade. I do really like doing that, but it's a little bit much for like daytime and classes and stuff, so I haven't been doing that. And I think just because it hasn't started to really cool down yet, I just haven't been feeling like reaching for this one as much, but I do love this palette. So I think as it starts to cool down, we start to really like transition more into fall. I think I will be reaching for this one more, and I do have like a little bit more of a dip in it, but for 4 uses it's not really a massive difference from last month. So I think that I will definitely be trying to reach for this one more in the coming months. From my Milk Gemini palette, I have the shade Mochi, which is a greenish mustard sort of shade. This is so grungy and fall appropriate, and I'm really glad to have this one in now. I wasn't really reaching for it as much over the summer, but I have reached for this 6 times since the last update for 17 uses total. I did say that I was going to try to reach for this one a little bit more over the last month, and I didn't really quite get there. I think this was about the same as my usage on this for August. I think that there is a little bit of a growing dip on this. I reached for green eyeshadows like a whole bunch last week. Last week was like the week of green eyeshadows, and I was like that a little bit for the week before school started. So I have been reaching for this one a little bit more. Don't think that I'm going to pan this one with this and with some of the other colors that I've been pairing with this. I've been going in with a really fluffy brush and just like using this as a transition shade, and I find if I don't really build it up, the green doesn't show through as much, whereas if I really pack it on, it can kind of turn other looks a little bit more green. And sometimes I like that, but sometimes if I'm pairing it with, say, Dayspring, which is a really orangey sort of bronze color, I really don't want a greener transition color. So I think my goal for this next update is just going to be really to sort of like define that dip more, reach for this more, and just try to get a little bit more use out of this and have this look a little bit more used. Melt shadows, I feel like I say this every time I have a melt matte in this project, is that melt shadows are very pigmented and a little goes a very long way. So they are kind of difficult to make progress on it. You don't need a whole lot to get what you're going for. So I just want to use this one a little bit more over the next update and have a little bit more of an actual obvious dip happening. Okay, next up, also from the Milk Gemini palette, I rolled in the shade Leo last month, which is probably my favorite shade in this entire palette. It's like this gorgeous like sort of forest green with a hint of olive. These are like my kinds of green eyeshadows. I know that I'm currently working on the Huda Beauty Emerald Obsessions as my Pan That palette for this year. I am much more attracted to like grungy olive greens. I think as somebody who has olive undertones, those are sort of neutrals on me. They work so well with my skin tone and also my hair. So I have been reaching for this one a lot, especially over the last like couple of weeks. I feel like it started to cool down. It started to feel less like summer, and I have been just like feeling all of the greens and all the grungy tones. So this color is perfect for that. So I have reached for Leo 7 times since rolling it in. Last update for 7 uses total, and this has a very tiny dip going on in it. I generally with this one, I will do something like Mochi as the transition shade, and then I will use sort of a fine like precision crease brush, and then use this along my lower lash line and in my crease. And again, this is super dark and pretty pigmented, so a little goes a long way. I would be very surprised if I got anywhere near pan after 30 uses, but I am really enjoying having this in, especially for this time of year. I'm such a I think I said this last update too when I talked about how excited I was for fall, but I am such a basic bitch. Like, fall is my favorite, and this is probably my favorite palette in my collection, but especially for this time of year. So I see a lot more grungy greens and oranges in my future over the next like month or so, so I think this will be getting a lot more use. So next up, I have the shade Dayspring, which is from my Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. Now I have rearranged mine, so mine is in like a slightly different layout than the original, but I rolled in the shade Dayspring back when I had this in my original configuration, which was like quite a few months ago. And so I have used this 8 times since the last update for 19 uses total, and I really do want to hit pan on this one within the next month. I'm getting closer. I have actually panned Aster earlier in this project, so I do know that it's possible, and so I'm definitely getting there, but I think I probably have another like 7 to 12 uses on this before I hit pan, but I have been really feeling like reaching for this one a whole lot, especially over the last like couple of weeks. So I think if I could just sort of like continue that momentum, I think that I will probably have pan on this by the next update, which would be great because I know I said a while ago that I really did like having this in as like a safety shade because it's really flattering shade on me and it's not too like out there for daily use, but this has been in for quite some time and I am ready to hit pan on it and roll it out. And last but not least, we have my pan. So last month I rolled in the shade Sinful for my Pat McGrath Mini Sublime, and I did a really terrible job of describing this. It's kind of like a greenish platinum color. It doesn't look like too crazy green in the pan, but I think when you combine it with other colors that are a lot more warm toned, the green definitely like pops out a little bit more. So I used this 14 times since the last update and I did hit pan on this one. So I usually use this as an inner corner highlight with a smaller brush, which I felt like worked fairly well, but I don't think I love a super metallic foiled inner corner. I think I prefer like a satin or something a little bit less intense. I have a lot of texture, especially like, well, my eyes are just very textured, so I find that anything that is super intensely metallic like that kind of highlights things that I don't necessarily want highlighted. So even though I did definitely hit pan on this one and I did get a bunch of use out of it, I definitely didn't love it as an inner corner highlight, but it was really pretty as an all over lid shade and it worked so well with Mochi and Leo. So I'm really happy that I had this in, and I am also happy that I get to roll it out. So those are all of my palettes for this month. So I do have, obviously I did hit one pan this month, so I am going to be rolling that shade out. I don't have anything that I'm close to usage goal. I think I have a couple that I could have usage goal on by the next update, so I'm gonna go for that. So obviously I have one pan for this month. I'm hoping I'll have some more rollouts next month with like some usage goals and stuff, but just one rollout for this month. So I set my random number generator to 104s and I rolled the shade 61, which is the shade Chai from my ABH Curly Bible palette. And even though this is a pretty boring shade, I'm actually really happy to have this in because I have been using this as a transition shade or like a crease shade in conjunction with the Dayspring for quite some time now. It's been sort of like one of my, it's either this or like some of the shades from some of the warm browns from the Norvina palette. I have been sort of going back and forth between those when I want a more neutral sort of crease shade with Dayspring. I love the Sunrise palette, but it can get orange pretty quickly. So sometimes I just want like a more neutral toned down crease shade and I don't want to be going full on orange. And so Chai is really good for that. And I also do have like a little bit of a dip in it. Nothing crazy, but these are not deep pans. ABH shadows are notoriously easy to hit pan on. So I think this will, hopefully I will have pan on this one by the next update. And I'm also hoping that I will have pan on Dayspring, and I see using those two together quite a lot. So I'm gonna go and like swatch out my new color story and then I will come back and show you guys what we're working with. Okay, so I did some swatching and this is what we were working with. So I'm actually really happy with this. It's a very aesthetically pleasing sort of rainbow color story. I wish I had maybe like a lighter shade in there, but that's okay. I am definitely really happy with this. Obviously, I think like all of these could kind of work together. These guys could work together. So I definitely have options and I am really looking forward to playing around with this. So let's talk a little bit about my pan percentage because that has changed since the last update and honestly pretty significantly, more so than I expected. So as of the last update, I had 20 shades panned out of 104, I think. So I was at a pan percentage of about 18.5. I actually purchased two new palettes, one of which was the Colourpop Mega Palette. So my number of pans is now 147 and I have actually hit 5 new pans this month. So even though I was expecting like a pretty large like initial drop once I got those in pan percentage, my pan percentage hasn't actually changed a whole lot. So I have 25 pans out of 147 and so now I have a pan percentage of 17%. I'm not being super strict about this, but I think it is something that's interesting for me to keep track of, and I'm very like numbers focused. I really like data, so I just kind of like having this metric. I think it's kind of interesting. Enough nerding out about that. I'm definitely happy to have that. 2 of those new pans are in my Pan That palette, which an update for that is coming soon. I might film that after this or I might film that tomorrow, but I am definitely going to be doing an update for that soon. So having said that, I do have a couple of bonus pans to show you guys. Some of them are from last month, some of them are from this month. I think the first one that I'm going to show you guys is the ABH Curly Bible palette. So I obviously have hit a couple of pans in here. This was kind of, I think, my first bonus pan, and I did hit pan on the shade of Bible right here. This is a really gorgeous sort of rosy mauve color, and it's a really nice transition shade, especially if I'm using like the top row, which is a little bit more cool toned. So I did hit that. I also hit a surprise pan on Bear, which I really wasn't expecting. I didn't think I was that close at all, but that happened a couple days ago when I use my NYX Jumbo eye pencil as a base, which I don't do that often these days, but when I do, I will usually set the crease area down with a neutral eyeshadow. So if I'm going for warm toned, Bear's a little bit more yellow, so I will use that one, and then if I'm going more cool toned, I will use base from the Norvina palette, which is a little bit more rose toned, a little bit more pink. So I hit pan on Bear, which I really wasn't expecting, but it was just kind of like a fun surprise. So that happened. So I had 2 more pans that way. I also realized while I have this palette open that I need to officially roll out Moo. So I hit pan on this one last update, but when I filmed my last update, I was very freshly post-op, and I had actually brought this palette back to the city the day before I had surgery and then went right back down to hang out with my parents while I recovered. So I didn't have this on me, but I did hit pan, so I wanted to wait to officially roll it out, even though I haven't used it. I don't think I've used it a whole lot since the last update, or not that I've counted, but I did want to just show you guys that I did hit pan on it. It's a small pan, but it's a pan nonetheless, so I am going to be rolling this one out. And then I have a bunch of actually bonus pans in the Norvina palette. I have been reaching for this one so much recently. This is one of my favorite palettes, and I really didn't expect that when I purchased this, but I've been loving using it these days. So the first one that I hit was the shade Love, and then I also hit pan in Dreamer and Rose Gold. So I am definitely making progress on this palette. Like I said, I just love this one a lot, and it's great for neutral days where I want to incorporate like maybe a little bit of color, but I don't want to get too crazy. So this has been perfect for sort of back to school. So I definitely wasn't surprised to see pan on some of those. So I do have a bunch of looks to show you. I think I have like 3 here. They're all green, which I feel like we're doing sort of a similar thing to the last update, where all the looks I had that I remember to photograph were purple. I swear I haven't only worn green eyeshadow this update, but apparently that was everything that I photographed. So this was sort of like a more basic sort of green look. So I used Mochi as the transition shade, and to blend out the lower lash line, I used Leo in the crease, and then Sinful as my inner half of the eyelid, and then a little bit of Dayspring on the outer half. I'm pretty particular about making sure that the undertones of my eyeshadows match. So I wasn't really a big fan of like the really oranginess of Dayspring and then the sort of green undertones of Sinful, but I tried it. I did sort of enjoy like the rest of the colors working together. For pretty much the rest of the month, I wore the variations of this look a couple of times. So instead of Dayspring as my outer third color, I would use either more Leo, or I would use the shimmery olive color from my Pan That palette. Next up, I had a look where I was, I guess, unofficially trying to dupe the vibes of the Colourpop The Child palette, which every time I see that I think it's really pretty, and then I realized that I have so many greens and I really don't need another green palette. But I used the mint shade from my Pan That palette as my transition shade. I used Leo as a crease color and along the lower lash line, and then I used Sinful as my inner half of the eyelid, and then the shimmery olive as my outer third, and I think I took Sinful into the inner corner as well. And last but not least, this was one that I did I think last weekend, and I really enjoyed it. I was sort of trying to mimic a look that I saw on Pinterest from I think Mademoiselle Lantern. I think she's a Canadian beauty blogger. Anyway, so she had this one look and I tried to mimic it. We have very different eye shapes, so it didn't quite work out. I did really enjoy this. So I used Fire OG to sort of like map out where I was putting my wing. This is I think as close as I'm ever going to get to graphic liner with my eye shape. And then I used Leo to add a little bit more depth to the outer and inner corners of my eye. And then I used the shade Goals as my sort of all over lid shade. And then I also added Sinful into the inner corner and sort of like inner third just to add a little bit of light and brightness. And then I used Leo and Mochi along the lower lash line. So I really did like this. It was out of my comfort zone, but I think that sort of like really winged off look makes my eyes look a lot more smaller and closed off than they are, and my eyes are already pretty small and closed off, so I find that this just kind of accentuated that. But it did make me look and feel very like snatched and fierce, so I did enjoy that. But in terms of like the most flattering way of doing eyeshadow on my face, maybe not quite so much, but it was fun and I'm glad I tried it. Alright, so those were all of my looks to show you from this one, and hopefully I will have a little bit more progress for you guys next month. So I am hoping to pan on both Chai and Dayspring. I think that that is a very doable. And then I think it's also pretty possible for me to hit my 30 uses goal on Mochi, because I feel like I've had that in for a while and I would kind of like to roll it out. It's very doable for me to probably use that 13 more times between now and the next update. So that's sort of what I'm going to go for. Probably 2 rollouts, hopefully 3. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't already subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like, and hopefully I will catch you in the next one. Bye!